It's a great pleasure and honor this evening to see all of you and to have such a wonderful audience for our distinguished guest. My name is Professor Stephen Katz. I'm the director of the Elie Wiesel Center for Jewish Studies. We're the co-sponsors with the law school. We're delighted to share with the law school, especially Professor Pnina Lahav, who was my partner in this undertaking. And we welcome all of you. I'm not going to say any more except to introduce the distinguished dean of the law school, Maureen O'Rourke, who will introduce the ambassador. Dean.
Thanks, Stephen. I want to thank both Professor Katz and Professor Lahav for bringing our guest here tonight. And on behalf of the law school and the Elie Wiesel Center for Judaic Studies, and indeed the entire Boston University community, I'm delighted to welcome Ambassador Gabriela Shalev this evening. Ambassador Shalev is Israel's 14th ambassador to the United Nations and the first woman appointed to the position. She started her career as a law professor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem and later took the position of president and provost of the Kiryat Ono Academic College at Tel Aviv. Besides being a distinguished teacher and educator, she is also a renowned scholar and has received many prestigious prizes for her scholarship in contract law and comparative contract law. She has been a visible leader in the Israeli public sector for over 30 years, serving on many government committees addressing issues of efficiency and ethics and governance, the status of women, government media relations, and others. Ambassador Shalev has served on many corporate boards and organizations, including such global corporations as Teva Pharmaceuticals, Core, and Delek, as well as on several auditing committees of banks and corporations. She is the author of 9 books and scores of articles, including a 2-volume treatise on contract law, which is the leading authority on the subject in Israel. About the treatise, the Chief Justice of Israel, Aharon Barak, an expert on private law himself, wrote that, quote, "This project is humongous in its scope, depth, lucidity, and precision," end quote. Ambassador Shalev has been offered many distinguished government positions, including the prestigious position of Attorney General. She turned them all down until very recently when she decided to enter the world of politics and make a contribution to the State of Israel. This decision led her to accept the position of Ambassador to the United Nations, which she has been performing since September of 2008. Now, as you all know, the General Assembly of the United Nations is still in session, and the Security Council and the Assembly often address matters related to the Middle East. So we are therefore particularly grateful to Ambassador Shalev for finding time in her extremely busy schedule to visit us at Boston University. So I'm delighted to introduce Ambassador Gabriela Shalev.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dean O'Rourke. Thank you for coming, all of you. It's a special pleasure for me to stand in front of members of the faculty, professors, and young faces of students, which I really miss. I'm used to teach for so many years, and now I must say that I'm used to speak in front of a different audience at the United Nations. Special thanks to my friend, Professor Pnina Lahav. Without her, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here in many senses, not only be here as an outcome of the kind invitation that the Elie Wiesel Center and the Law School of Boston University offered, but also I won't be here as the first woman ambassador to the United Nations, because Pnina is really the woman, the person who made me aware of feminism. I used to say, and I say it not only here, that I used to be a closet feminist. And Pnina was the one who took me out of whatever it was. Pnina said that, Professor Lahav said that I'm a feminist without acknowledging it. And maybe I was. I always thought which is, I think, very old-fashioned nowadays for young women, that everything that I achieved was because of my own character, achievements, qualities. But I found out that to be a woman in a world dominated by men, like the law school at the Hebrew University, where we both grew up, like the boards that were mentioned, like the Israeli society in general, it puts a special burden on me as a woman, as a Zionist, as an Israeli. I know that the reason that I was chosen to be the Israeli ambassador to the United Nations was, foremost, because I was a woman. Foreign minister at that time, Tzipi Livni, insisted on having a woman for this position. And there were many men who wanted this position. They thought, maybe wrongly so, that it's a wonderful position. And I'll get back to it afterwards. But Tzipi Livni insisted herself, of course, being a woman, being a foreign minister, that a woman should take upon herself this position. And she made the decision not to look only into the diplomatic circles, into politics, because I'm none of the above, and she chose me. And I had to really deliberate with myself, with my family, with my kids, with my husband, whether I should take it upon myself. And at the end, it did not take long that I decided that I do want to do it. Professor Katz laughed when I said that people, or men mainly, thought that this is such a wonderful, fascinating position. I want to quote my husband, who is a specialist on Dante, not only on cooking. And he compared the life between New York, which, as you know, is a wonderful place, and the UN, which is not such a wonderful place for Israel, is moving between the Inferno, which is the UN, and the Paradiso, but without a purgatorio in between. And I must say that since I was appointed to this challenging, I know Americans don't say difficult, challenging position, life has become, for Israel, at the United Nations and in the United States, much more complicated than it was before. I'll just mention a few elements or factors that make this position so complicated. First of all, I arrived a year ago, just a year and a few weeks, in September last year. That was just the beginning of the economic crisis. Or maybe it was not the beginning, it was the midst, but we did not know that it's going to be as bad. Very soon, there was a change of government, not only in Israel, but also in the United States. In Israel, we have now a right-wing parliament, right-wing government, although the Labour Party is part of the government, a right-wing cabinet. On the other hand, here at the United States, we have a liberal, young, very different administration and the president and the White House. Nothing that we in Israel were used to for many, many years. Then, if you want to add to it, on top of this change, you know, it's like people that have to get used to each other after many years that they were living apart. Just 2 months after I arrived here, the Hamas announced the end of the Tahdiyah, the ceasefire, or the lull. And right afterwards, after 2 weeks, 2 days after Christmas, the CAST-led, or the Gaza Operation, started, which was a difficult time for everybody. And I remember when our chief of staff, Ashkenazi, came to New York, and he said, "I know that you have a difficult job." I said, "You know, my job," he even said more, he said, "the most difficult." I said, "You know, my job may be difficult, but it is really difficult for the children in Sderot, and for our soldiers, and for the people that live in Gaza, the Palestinians." After the war, which was an operation or a war, was the situation that evolved in Gaza, the aftermath of the operation, which also brought a lot of pressure because of the humanitarian situation. A lot of pressure on Israel, on the Israeli government, to alleviate the situation there by opening the crossings, by enabling more aid to come into Gaza. So today, and Professor Nav knows, I almost could not come because the Goldstone report is now being discussed at the General Assembly. But the vote took place just a few hours ago, and maybe I'll later tell you what happened there. But this was just the opening. I'm not going to speak for a long time because I'd rather, as I told the Dean, I'd rather hear your queries, questions, remarks. I hope that I will be able to answer at least some of them. But I want to say a few words about my vision and my hope when I took upon myself this position. I think one of the reasons that I was nominated, as I said, appointed, was because I am a woman, and the idea behind it, which also was something that I was part of, was to change, in a way, the image of Israel at the United Nations and in the world in general. Israel that is perceived wrongly as a militaristic, belligerent state that is an occupier, and what it shows to the world is this kind of machoistic elements. I know, and maybe some of you, I know many of you, know that Israel is also very different, and it has so much more to offer and to contribute to the world. I want to mention here that a woman, our Prime Minister, Golda Meir, who is now the main topic or the main subject of a book in progress by Professor Lahav. She was the one, more than 50 years ago, when she was the foreign minister, when she decided to open the African continent to Israel, to the contribution that Israel can make to Africa. She visited more than 50 years ago. She visited when she was a foreign minister. Later on, she became a prime minister. But when she was the foreign minister, she visited many African states, and she noted how many developing countries have similar challenges to those that Israel is facing, such as a shortage of water, poor farming conditions, as we have in Israel, and a very difficult climate. And she was the one who established inside the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Foreign Ministry, Mashav, which is a program inside the Israeli Foreign Ministry that is focused on grassroots level human capacity building in Africa. And today, Mashav is Israel's premier development agency, and its name, we know, in the world is synonymous with sustainable development and result-oriented solutions. I'll give you just a few examples. I know this is not as sexy as what happens at the UN and the war and Goldstone, but this is something that I promised Pnina that I'm going to mention, because this is something that we, Israel, should be very proud of. So just a few examples, and I think they are very important. One of them is called Tipa, which in Hebrew means a drop. And it's shortened for a venture that is technological innovation for poverty alleviation. Technological innovation for poverty alleviation. Tipa is a system of a small-scale drip irrigation system, which was developed in Israel, and it extends the advantages of sophisticated water-saving technology to traditional farmers. And we, in Israel, we brought it over to many African countries who never heard about Israel, don't know what it means, don't know where it is, and it offers the potential of self-sufficiency to those who normally struggle to survive. This is one example. The other one is similar, just in the name. It's Tipat Chalav, which means in Hebrew a drop of milk. And this is a very special Israeli system of clinics for healthy babies and pregnant women that visit those clinics in the communities and get advice and health care. And this is this concept of Tipat Chalav is also something that was established in a few African countries. We also have more examples. Farmers for the Future, which is education for young children who will become the farmers, teaching them market-oriented farmers techniques. I was very proud, just 2 months after I arrived, to sign in the name of the State of Israel a very special agreement. I'm a professor of contracts, but I never signed such a contract or such an agreement in the name of the State of Israel with the UNDP, which is the United Nations Development Program, a contract to offer money, but also knowledge to African states in the field of food security and agriculture. So this is what I was hoping to promote, but unfortunately, most of my time for the last year was and is still dedicated to the our main interest at the United Nations, which is keeping the peace, security, safety of our people back in Israel. And sometimes I ask myself, and I'll bring it now to the table, what happened? How come that the relationship between Israel and the United Nations, which was so great and so friendly 60 years ago, how did it sour? How did it happen that we have the feeling in Israel, as I said today in the media, that, I don't know how you call it in soccer, but that the game is from the beginning, משחק מכור. That it's sold, yeah, that from the beginning you know the, yeah, fixed game, right, fixed game. How did it happen? You know, in 1947, November, the United Nations decided about the partition. And I remember it was a day that, in a way, the United Nations, which was a small group of nations that gathered together after the atrocities of Second World War, they recognized the right of the Jewish people to build a homeland in the state, in what was at that time Palestine. By the way, if the Arabs at that time would accept the idea of partition and accept this resolution, we would be in a completely different situation now. But instead of it, maybe if you know from your history, 7 Arab countries just launched, instead of adopting this decision, launched war against the small, newly born state of Israel. That was 47. In 48, we had the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, and in that Declaration of Independence, which is still, you know, you'll have to tell me if it's true, but it's a very important document in our constitutional law. We don't have a written constitution yet, but the Declaration of Independence, which brings the aspirations, the hopes of our founding fathers, there is there a sentence, a paragraph, which is not always noted, by which the young state of Israel adopts the Charter of the United Nations. So the values and the ideals of the United Nations were very similar to what our founding fathers in Israel wanted to embrace. And it's no wonder, because like the United Nations, Israel also was born as an outcome of the Holocaust and the terrible things that happened at the World War, Second World War. And in order, what the United Nations always says, never again. This is not going to happen again. So what happened over these 60 years? How come that this love story soured? This should, take a whole seminar because many things happened. But I think one of the main reasons is that within those 60 years, the United Nations, who was a small group, we were the 59th state to join the United Nations. Since then, now we have 192 states that are members. Each of them has one vote, as we could see today at the General Assembly at the United Nations. Most of these newly accepted members to the United Nations are developed countries that democracy is unknown to them, that do not share the same values that we and other democracies share. And many of them are Muslims and non-aligned countries. So now we have, just to start with, what we call the automatic block of 100, as you could see, maybe if you are reading or interested in what happens at the United Nations, just 2 days ago, 118 countries endorsed a resolution to bring the Goldstone report from Geneva to New York against any procedural or logic in it, because maybe we'll get back to it, maybe not, but this shouldn't have come before the before the General Assembly. But anyhow, it was endorsed by 118 countries, and these are the countries that are always going to vote against Israel, whatever the merits of the case are. So this is one of the reasons. So I think that we must admit that what happens today at the United Nations, and the United Nations is a mirror of the world, so it's reflecting what happens all over, is a new kind of anti-Semitism, which is now called, this is the politically correct, anti-Zionism or anti-Israelism. And I can see it, and believe me, it's no fun. It's not something that you want to encounter, that there is a daily assault at the United Nations against Israel. There's no other country in the world, no other country in the world whose mere existence is challenged once and again, a country that is denied its, by rhetoric, but it brings also actions, its own right, which I think is a human right of self-defense. There's no other country in the world that has to justify once and again its mere existence. I want to quote Elie Wiesel, whose center you are so graciously heading, and I know that is one of the hosts of this event. After the Holocaust, Elie Wiesel said that during the Holocaust, not all victims were Jews, but all Jews were victims. I want to paraphrase it. At the United Nations, not all states face double standards and hateful campaign, but Israel always faces such double standards and hateful campaigns. There's not, that's the General Assembly. I'm not speaking, and I hope that you know that there's a difference about the Security Council. At the General Assembly, this is what we hear in the halls. I say in the halls because it's completely different in the corridors. When I meet my colleagues ambassadors, many of them from Arab countries, many of them countries that do not have any diplomatic relations with Israel, they say completely different things. They respect Israel, they think highly of Israel, sometimes they even tell us how they justify our actions in Israel as actions that we could not avoid. But when it comes to the General Assembly and they vote, they are part of the automatic bloc. And this is something that is so different than what I encountered all my life at the academia, the gap between the truth, the facts on the ground, and the way that people express themselves in the halls. The most recent example, and I'm going to leave it maybe to your questions and queries, is of course the so-called fact-finding mission regarding the Operation Cast Lead, otherwise named as the Goldstone report, which just a few hours ago the General Assembly voted by the same automatic bloc to endorse the report and to move it to be discussed at the Security Council, which is, of course, the most effective body of the United Nations. If you are interested, later on I can discuss the Goldstone report, but I want to share with you two more topics. One is Iran. Again, I come to you just one day after our army, our Navy, revealed that a ship, a cargo ship by the name of Frankop, was seized by the Israeli Navy, coming from Iran, bound for Hezbollah in Lebanon, filled with 10 times the number of weapons aboard the infamous Karin A, demonstrating that Iran is, first of all, violating resolutions of the United Nations. Don't want to bother you with numbers, but there are a few resolutions that explicitly prohibit Iran from supplying or transferring arms. And this cargo, I'll just give you the amount, 36 containers of hundreds of tons of a wide range of weaponry, including rockets, missiles, mortars. I'm quoting from a letter that I just signed this morning to the Secretary General, Ban Ki-moon, and to the monthly president of the Security Council, who is the Austrian ambassador. This is one of the letters that we are writing once and again, and I mentioned that this is a grave violation of the Security Council resolutions, and again, I said how Iran is violating the decisions, the resolutions, the spirit of the United Nations. We see Iran as the most dangerous country in the world. Let me remind you that Iran still, just, what was it, less than a month ago, Ahmadinejad at the United Nations called for the destruction of Israel. Destruction of Israel. They continue to deny the Holocaust. They continue to provide, as we saw yesterday, weapons to terrorist groups. It's the Hezbollah to our north, it's the Hamas in our midst, it's other groups in the world, Al-Qaeda. But mainly, and this is the biggest threat, they continue to develop nuclear capabilities in defiance of the international community. There was just five weeks ago, there was an admission, by the way, or maybe even a month, admission of the Iranian of an undisclosed uranium enrichment plant outside Qom in Iran. This leaves no doubt. The Iranian nuclear program is a crisis that the world must be aware of. Put together with it the fact that they also develop long-range missiles. So, right, Israel is going to be the first to be targeted. But as you know, nothing nowadays is contained within boundaries of a country. I mentioned the economic crisis. I can mention the flu, the swine flu, which does not have any borders. And as we know, this is terrible, but a nuclear crisis cannot be contained. It cannot be only Israel. And we see it as our mission and goal to make the world aware that Iran must be stopped from developing nuclear capabilities. Maybe this brings me to the last topic that I want to encounter before I will refer to you. And this is our relationship, Israel with the United States. Because I'm sure many of you know that the United States is now having some kind of an engagement with Iran. President Obama spoke directly to the Persian people. And we know that this dialogue and these negotiations are taking place. This, as you know, is part of the new policy or the new strategy of the White House. They engage, which is wonderful. They engage with Iran. They engage with the Muslim world. They even engage with the United Nations. Dr. Susan Rice, the new American ambassador to the United Nations, is a very good friend of mine. She's as young as you are, Maureen. And when I first met her, I told her that she's just 2 years older than my daughter. And we're good friends. She's an academic. She's a brilliant woman. But this is on a personal level. I see the way that the United States is now being accepted, received at the UN. They've changed completely their attitude. In the past, at the times of Bolton, the ambassador, later on Khalil Zad, the United States was disliked, to say it in a very soft way, and very aloof. That's the way that they treated themselves, and this is the way that they were treated. Now I see when Susan Rice comes into the room, she's being embraced. She's black, like the president, very close to the president. She's a cabinet member, very respected. And the people, and the ambassadors, many of them from African countries, from Muslim countries, they love the way that she is reacting. By the way, like President Obama, like Prime Minister Netanyahu, Susan Rice also gave her formative speech at the university, at NYU. Just a few months ago, she had a NYU speech, and she said there, we are going to change our attitude towards the United Nations. We are going to have a dialogue, and I say this is part of the strategy of the United States all over. I wish they would also do it in Israel. Like everybody expects President Obama to also to speak to the people of Israel. You know, there was a very good article in Haaretz, and I want to quote it because we at the academia, we are used to quote by names, Aluf Ben, a journalist. And he said to President Obama, why don't you speak to the Israelis? Don't mix Israelis with the Jewish people. They are different. They speak a different language. They are seated at a different place. You know, the idea that Obama is surrounded by Jewish people does not make him an Israeli, does not change his attitudes, whatever they are, to Israel. So let me say it very clearly. The United States is the main and the most important ally that we have in the world. That was always like that. I mean, always, but over the last few decades. Maybe not right at the beginning, 60 years ago, but since Harry Truman, every American president, including President Obama, are respectful, and we have very good relations with them, not only political or diplomatic relations, but on many, many other, some of them hidden areas. But I thought, so we share with the United States not only strategic, but not only materialistic and not only the same interests, but we also share, I think, with the United States the same values, the same respect for human life, the same kind of legal system which is independent and very respected. Same ideals, and I think the United States knows that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. Let me finish here just this part of, because I did not want to talk more than yeah, but maybe, okay. But I want to conclude this part and then use the Zman or the time that we have to react to your queries and questions. But I want to say something that binds us Jewish people. I know that there are some or many of you in this hall, and the Israelis. There are two concepts which are at the base of Israel as the homeland of the Jewish people. One of them is Tikkun Olam, which is making the world a better place. And the second is Or LaGoyim, which is a light upon the nations. And I'll just reflect on these two for a moment. Tikkun Olam is making the world for everybody that lives in it, the whole human race, a better place. And this is really what I started with, that we in Israel want to make the world a better place. There's water here. Thank you. Most welcome. To help the world and contribute to the world. And this is the idea that brings me also to the second Israeli phrase, which is Or LaGoyim. That Israel and the Jewish people will be a light upon the nations. You know that I think a quarter of the Nobel Prize laureates in the United States are Jewish. And over the last decade, Pnina reminded me, we have a few, I think, one of them, the last one, a woman. Nobel Prize, not in peace, unfortunately, not in literature, but in science. You know, Chekhanova and Hershko and Ada Yonat now. And this is really the idea that so many Jewish and Israeli families want to achieve to the education and really contributing to the world. We can make the world, we Israelis and we human beings and we Jewish people can make the world a better place and continue to shine, or try to go on and shining as a light upon the nations only and only if we will be allowed to flourish beyond the battlefield. Nowadays, most of our energies are dedicated to the very somber and sad situation where there's no peace process, no talks, no negotiations, and I must say our national anthem is Hatikva, which is in Hebrew hope. So we Jewish people must be optimistic. I want to quote again Golda Meir, who said that we Israelis do not have the luxury of being pessimistic. So thank you very much, and I'll answer all your queries. Shall I do it? Yeah,
Why
okay.
do you think it is that people in the United Nations talk to you in one way in the corridors and another way when they're voting?
Just keep an eye on who asks the question.
Okay, good. I think I should bring in my daughter, who is a psychologist. But this is more a philosophical question. Why do people act in one way behind closed doors? Why do they come and tell me things that they will never repeat in open doors? I'll tell you, I'll give you, I just can share with you this kind of bewilderment. Why do people do it? First of all, they get orders from their capital. Secondly, I think many of them do not share the same strategy or policy that their government dictates. But for me, coming from so many years in the academic world, it was disturbing to see and to hear what people say and how they are very friendly in receptions and in dinners, especially when there's nobody around, how they sit next to me for hours and tell me how they respect Israel and we should go on protecting and so on. And afterwards, they, even when we walk in the corridors, they avoid the eye contact. I think for me, as a human being, as a woman, it was strange, disturbing to have this kind of behavior, which I would never accept from my children or from my friends. But this is the world that we, at the United Nations, this is where we live, that people do not say what they mean, and when they speak, it's always slogans. It's never something that goes down, not never, but yeah.
So which one do they mean, pro or con? Which is the one they really mean and which is the one they're just pretending?
What means at the end, you know, as they say, I think they say it in football, or even in examinations. What is the last line? What is the outcome? But I think what they really mean is what they tell me. What they really mean is what they say behind in the corridors, but not inside the halls.
Do you want to go ahead? Ambassador, you touched briefly on the prospects of Israel exporting alternative technologies, like technologies used for farming to countries in Africa. And I was wondering what your opinion is. Israel is a state that lacks water and has ample sunlight and historically hasn't been granted access to energy by Arab nations. The prospect of developing alternative technology in Israel for energy is very high, and I was wondering what your thoughts were on the effects that would have on the political power of the Arab nations on Israel.
I think you yourself know the answer. Once we will be less dependent on water, and maybe we can change the climate, and the fact that we are surrounded, you know, on one side by the sea and all around us. I think it will be very helpful if we flourish and we have these alternative energies to the peace prospects in the Middle East. But again, unfortunately, we still have to allocate most of our efforts, technology, budget, to protecting our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next. I'm sorry, you have to use the microphone.
Yeah.
Oh. Israel has never been admitted to the Security Council. Does that have an effect on all the other members?
Thank
And
you.
why not? Why
Thank
haven't
you.
they been?
Thank you. First of all, the good news, then the not so good news. The good news is that we are candidates, and we're working on it, to become member of the Security Council in 2019. You know, when Prime Minister Netanyahu came into my room at the beginning of the General Assembly, he said nothing had changed here. He was the Israeli ambassador more than 20 years ago at the same room, and together with him at that time sat in my room Mike Herzog, who is the special envoy of Defense Minister Barak, who is the son of another great ambassador, Chaim Herzog, who later on was the president of the state. And they were joking, and they say, maybe you also have a prospect of becoming a daughter of an ambassador. I will never be anymore, but a prime minister, you know. So I want to say that at the end, 2019, I'm not going to be there, but we are now collecting, and don't think it's so funny, because many countries have not yet been admitted to the Security Council. In 2019, believe me, you are all young people, it's around the corner. The Security Council, and thank you for the question, because it brings me back to the difference between the General Assembly and the Security Council. The General Assembly is just a place usually where people have let out and they speak, and they speak whatever, they prepare the statements, and it's just rhetoric. But the Security Council is the body that has powers and is the effective and instrumental body of the United Nations. It has 5 permanent members, which is the United States, Russia, China, the UK, and France. They have 8 non-permanent members who are being elected for 2 years. And for example, I just give you names. There are now it's Austria, Uganda, Burkina Faso. Do you know what Burkina Faso is? Have you heard about it? Yeah, okay. So this is but they are members of the Security Council. I'll tell you why we've never until now been members of the Security Council, although we think that we can contribute and we should be there sometime. Because we are not even aligned to any group of countries that have the ability to send their candidates to the Security Council. There are groups of countries, African countries, Asian countries, European countries, and they, amongst themselves, are rotating who is going to be the member of the Security Council for the next 2 years, the non-permanent. We, naturally, geographically, we should have been part of the Asian group, but they don't want us. And as, who said it? Groucho Marx, I think. I don't want to be a member of a group that would accept me. So we cannot be, or a club that would take people like me. So we, on the other hand, we cannot find ourselves in a club that does not accept us. So what happened was that we were kind of affiliated in a very unnatural way to WEOG. WEOG is the West Europe and other countries. It's or other groups. These are very, what we call like-minded countries. It's wonderful countries like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and some of the European countries. And we hope to be one of 2 candidates from WEOG for the year 2019. So this is the explanation. Thank you for the question. Yes, please.
Could you please take the mic and then everybody will hear you? Go out that way.
I would like to ask a question regarding the Goldstone report. During the operation in Gaza and even afterwards, many of us received a lot of documentation, such as YouTube movies, regarding what has been done in Gaza, including there were movies that showed that Hamas killed in cold blood hundreds of Fatah members, and they launched rockets from schools and so on and so forth. Why all of this documentation wasn't shown to Goldstone and others and so on?
Thank you. You know, wherever I come to speak, people complain about Israeli hasbara. Namely, why doesn't Israel makes better use of the media to explain its tactics, strategy, standing, attitudes, like what happened at the Gaza Operation? I have a few answers to that. One is that we are a country that we don't maybe have enough resources, unlike the Arabs. They have now launched a war on the media, in the media, and they are doing it very talently. but there are other elements. We are trying. The ministry. By the way, it's not my mission at the UN is very small, and we have our hands full with diplomatic efforts. But even the consulate, with its means, and I think Ronnie and Nadav here know exactly how difficult it is to face the unrelenting attacks of Arabs and also some of our friends in the academia and all over the world. It is very difficult to explain the situation in the Middle East. People do not know the background. People do not know how difficult it is to launch a war when there are human shields used by Hamas. The Goldstone report did not take account of the years that the Hamas was launching rockets. And the journalists, they look for some interesting things. You know, for 8 years, the whole southern part of Israel, 1 million people were under attack. But then they came and asked us, how many were killed? And the fact, you know, the children there were traumatized for so many years, you know. They had like 20 seconds to run to the shelter. This is not something that is as interesting for the media as what the Hamas and the Palestinians show to the world. I'll just give you 2 examples. Because maybe it's our fault that we are lacking in hasbara, in getting to the media. At the time of the cast-led operation, at the beginning, I was called, and I'm really not experienced in it, to all television stations and to go and here's the Israeli ambassador to explain why did we start this cast-led operation. I did not see it because I don't like to see myself even afterwards on the screen. But friends told me that while they were asking me questions and I was trying to explain why this operation was launched and started, they had this divided screen. So on one side, I was there trying to answer the very tough questions, CNN, the BBC. And on the other part of the screen, they showed the wounded children at the Shifa hospital in Gaza. And what, you know, the heart breaks when you see, and no words can describe the anguish, the sorrow of watching this kind of horror. There was a discussion at the Security Council regarding the Gaza operation, and the Palestinian observer, he calls himself ambassador, but he's still a permanent observer, the Palestinian representative of the Palestinians. He came, Riyad Mansour is his name, and he put in front of him, namely in front of me, because I was facing him, a picture, a photo of a child at the hospital, blind and amputated. And I sat there for 3 hours watching this. And you know, I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, and the heart breaks to see it. And I was debating with myself, shall I tell the story of the child whose name is Osher? Osher means in Hebrew happiness, who was wounded in Sderot by rockets of Hamas. And one of his legs was amputated, the other was badly wounded. He moved with his family at the time of the cast-led operation, where there were so many rockets and mortars on Sderot, to his grandmother in Ashkelon. But then Ashkelon was targeted. So he asked his grandmother, where shall we go from here? But then I decided I'm not going to do it, because this is a cynical use of one child or human suffering, and I'm not going to use this way of rhetoric. Maybe it was a mistake, but you must understand the world sympathizes with the underdog, and the Palestinians are really in a very difficult situation between themselves and the Hamas and the government that they don't have, and the fights between Hamas and Fatah, and the Hamas using the people that they want or should protect as human shields and hiding behind them in mosques and kindergartens. All this, you know, we say it again and again, but this is the truth of the matter. So you are right. We should do more, and I always tell my friends, even those that do not agree with the way that the government is negotiating or not negotiating, I always tell them, try to educate yourself, find out what's going on, and tell it to your children, your colleagues, your neighbors, because this is the only way that we can spread what we find is the right way to live in very little piece of land where we want to live. And believe me, we do. We do want to live in peace and security side by side with a Palestinian state.
Please. Yes, sir.
I think if that's all right, you will be the last?
Yes, this will be the last. Please
Okay.
take the microphone.
Okay.
Repeat the question.
This gentleman asked me to be kind and with pleasure and comment on the Goldstone report. And may I ask, is there somebody who wants to ask, or shall I, is there somebody who feels that there's something that I should discuss further after? Okay, so I'll yeah, please ask now and then I'll answer.
I guess I had two questions regarding Iran. So I guess we all know that Ahmadinejad doesn't really have any power. So who really does have power?
The mullahs.
But like, which ones right now? Because Khamenei isn't there anymore. So like, what's the structure? Who are you dealing with? And then the other question was, has anyone proposed any economic constraints on Iran and actually tried sticking by them? Because it was, the US even suggested it, and then it was just recommended that American companies not go into Iran because of safety reasons, but not because of, like, nothing's being enforced in an economic realm.
Okay. With your permission, I'll answer that one, and then I'll... Thank you. Thank you very much. As you saw, what happened at Iran at the time of the election, this is not a democracy, and this is not the way to have democratic elections, but this is the elected government. We think, this is my personal view, but I think this is the common view shared, that who is really behind Ahmadinejad are the mullahs, the priests. And I think this is the way that we must react also regarding Afghanistan and Ahmadinejad. They have their own representatives who are part of the regime at the United Nations. We do not deal with them, so it doesn't matter who do you not deal with, but they are the representatives of Iran. By the way, Iran is one of the only countries that we do not speak with them. They do not speak with us. It's Syria, it's Iran, it's Lebanon, which to me is very painful, because I remember when I grew up, they used to say Lebanon is going to be the second country that will make peace with Israel. But now we sit just in front of them at the UN, and they just won't even nod when we come in, or when they come in, they completely ignore us, which is sad. It's interesting, and then I'll get to Goldstone, that the president of the General Assembly nowadays, for this year, is Ambassador Treki, who was the foreign minister of Libya. Libya got also by a way of rotation, the presidency of the General Assembly for 1 year. So last year when I arrived, the president of the General Assembly was a Nicaraguan priest by the name of Descoto, who was terrible. I mean, really, I don't know, is there press here? But really, people thought that the guy is just very strange, the way that he acted. And he attacked, I sat there at his, but I think it was known. I sat there at the opening statement, and he attacked not only Israel, but the whole, he declared war on the whole Western world. He's a socialist. He was the foreign minister of Nicaragua. And he said terrible things about Israel, comparing Israel to South Africa, the apartheid. But every time he saw me, he used to hug me and tell me how much he loves the Jewish people, you know. And really a strange guy. So when I heard that, it's not only me, I mean, everybody thought that. And now that we found out that the Libyans are going to be the presidents, for us it was really going from bad to worse. This is the way that you say it, from bad to worse. But then we realized that, first we thought that as the Libyan, and you know, Libya is not a friend of Israel, although it's now a little friend of the United States. We thought that he will not even give me the right to speak, but he will put, when I will go up on the podium, he will put one of his deputies. He has something like 17, also from different countries. But a couple of days ago, there was the report of the Human Rights Council, the general one, not the Goldstone, to which I'm going to refer in a moment, and he called on me for the first time, and he even nodded. Because usually never did the Libyan, either at the Security Council or at the General Assembly, even acknowledge the existence of an Israeli ambassador. So he called on me, a distinguished Israeli ambassador. And I made a point of saying, Mr. President, thank you. And because he sits behind me when I speak on the podium. So this was, you know, something small to be mentioned. But yesterday, when I gave my statement regarding the Goldstone report, he called on me. He was there because he convened the General Assembly. But when I finished and he called on the Sudanese, he did not say, as he says to everybody, thank you, distinguished ambassador, for your nothing. You know, I just left there, and he called on the next distinguished ambassador, the Sudanese. But I left right away. I did not hear what he said. So let's just say a few words, and thank you for your patience, about the Goldstone report. The Goldstone report was conceived or born at the Human Rights Council in Geneva. The Human Rights Council is a council that is biased, one-sided. Over the few years that it exists, I'm sorry, Steve, maybe you should say it now. Oh, okay. Over the years that it existed, it passed more resolutions regarding Israel than all resolutions regarding all nations in the world, some of them champions of human rights, put together. And half of its resolutions are about Israel. And some of the members of the Human Rights Council are really great protectors of human rights. I don't want to mention the countries because it's really, sometimes it's sickening. A few months ago, Dr. Rice called me personally, Susan Rice, and said, Gabriela, I know that you will not like it, and your government is not going to like it, but we decided, the Americans, we decided to join in the Human Rights Council. For many years, the Americans did not join in the Human Rights Council. We are not a member on purpose. We do not put our candidacy because we know that we will never get there. But we made a point. And I appreciated it because this was even before the President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton announced about this kind of joining in by the United States. And she said, and I can quote her, she said, we are going to join in order to clean the dirt. She said something even stronger, from the inside, and not from the outside to criticize it. Maybe, I say maybe, now they regret, because the Human Rights Council is so one-sided that you could see it by the mandate of the Goldstone report. The mandate was one-sided, was accusing us right away of war crimes and violations of international law, even before the mission was formed. This is the mandate. The team itself of Justice Goldstone, who is a very respected jurist, and I know some people here even know him personally. The team was composed of people that right away you could tell that they are biased against Israel. One of them is Professor Chirkin from, I think, London or Oxford, I'm not sure, who at the time of the Gaza Operation wrote a letter to one of the journals, I think it was the London Time, accusing Israel of war crimes and ignoring or not even acknowledging our right of self-defense. So this was the team. Then we decided not to cooperate. I know that some people make comments about it. They think it would have been better. I don't know. I don't want to get into it. When people asked me, and they keep asking me all the time, as a law professor, do you think it was the right decision? I'm not a law professor now when I stand here. I'm a diplomat. I represent my country. And this decision was taken. Some people say that this was the right decision because anyhow it would have come out the way it is. And I think I discussed it with some of you at the reception. The whole Goldstone report was a pretext, an excuse to attack again Israel. And we see now what happens. This is a relentless campaign against Israel. And the Goldstone report is just in order to open again all these wounds. It says terrible things about Israel, about our soldiers. And I can't even start, saying all the arguments. Some of them are in my speech yesterday, and I don't want to repeat it, but of course you can find it in all the internet and in the webcast and in the internet of our mission. But what happened today shows exactly how unbalanced this report is. Something else happened that also shows it. On the 15th of September, that was the day that the General Assembly opened, the ceremony. At that morning, we were not even prepared for it. Justice Goldstone came to New York and had a press conference and presented his report. We woke up in the morning, the American morning. In Israel, it's already in the afternoon. The 15th of September, we thought that this will be presented in Geneva at the end of September. So all at once, we open the radio, the internet, the television, Justice Goldstone is there in front of the whole international press in New York at the day of the opening of the General Assembly, which of course put cloud and over the whole discussion at the General Assembly. It should have stayed in Geneva. And all our friends, we don't have many friends in the world, but we have some, of course, the Americans, the Australians, the Canadians, some like-minded countries in the world, in Europe, Italy, Holland, Germany, Czech Republic. All they voted with us, which in Geneva, to leave it in Geneva. But of course, there is the tyranny of the majority. It happened there, it happened at the United Nations yesterday and today, and now we are facing the debate in the Security Council, where we trust. We trust. People keep asking me, are you sure that the Americans are going to use the veto? I'm not sure about anything. In my age, you can see, I know that there are no assurances. We trust in God. But, and of course, in the human spirit. But we know that not only the Americans, not only the United States, but also other members of the Security Council will be able to distinguish the criticism, the need to look into what happened at the Gaza Operation, but not make us a pariah, which we are not. Like South Africa at the time, I know that many countries expect it, but I'm sure this will not happen. The whole main fact that we are put on the same level with the Hamas, a terrorist organization, which wants to murder, annihilate Israel, is just something unheard of. But let me, on this unhappy note, thank you very much. It was much nicer in these somber days than could be expected. I also want to mention my friend, distinguished friend, Professor Michael Rabin from Harvard, now I know, one of the brightest minds that Israel has produced. And I thank you and all my friends here for coming, and I wish you all the best. Toda rabba.
On behalf of the law school and the Elie Wiesel Center and all of you, I'd like to thank Professor Shalev for a wonderful evening, and we appreciate her candidness, her friendship. We thank her. Dina Rourke, thank you. We thank you all for coming. Good evening.